some town channel or something. So, okay. Are you going? Oh, yeah. Okay. Hi. Evening. My name is Tom Krauser. I'm a volunteer at the Senior Center. I give a computer clinic, walk-in clinic the first and third Tuesday of every month for people who have questions and are looking for advice on computers or just have a question about software or computers. I've been doing genealogy, or not, I hate to say the word genealogy because I'm not a genealogist. I'm just a person who got interested in my ancestry a few years ago and then signed up for Ancestry.com and then started filling out my family tree and, kept going. And right now I have about 17,000 people in my tree. So, but as my flyer said, I am not an expert. I'm not a genealogist, but I've been using it for a few years and I've come across a lot of things that just frustrate me with using Ancestry. And I've come up with some hints and tips that I hope, maybe you can use to make your search on Ancestry a lot easier. Okay. If you go to the website, and we'll see if the link works here. Well, let me get over to the screen here. So under personal, oops, there we go. I have a link to the Senior Center website. Okay. And on the Senior Center website, there's a computer class and resources. And if you click on that, okay. Now, she was uploading my latest paper, so maybe that was it. So here's helpful hints and tips on using Ancestry.com. And opening document. And there it is. So it's a 19-page paper that I created that's going to cover pretty much everything we're going to talk about tonight, as far as the hints and stuff go. There were some other papers I wanted to upload, but apparently they can't upload certain file types onto the website for you to download. Okay, so if you go to the website, you'll find the paper. Like I said, it's 19 pages. Whoops, so I didn't want to print it out for everybody, but you can go download it from the website itself. Okay, and so that will help you get whoops. Okay, so how many of you use Ancestry or use other programs? Everybody uses Ancestry? Okay, so you're all Ancestry users. I use I use Ancestry for all my research, but I also have Family Tree Maker 2019, okay? And what I find is that I want a copy on my computer myself that is not, if I choose to drop my subscription to Ancestry, I still have everything on my local hard drive and then backed up to my, backup drives and everything else. I don't really do a lot in Family Tree Maker other than do all my research and then I sync it. Does everybody know what syncing to Family Tree Maker is? Do you have Family Tree Maker on yours?
I don't, but thinking I'm going to take up Ancestry.
It brings it down, but the nice thing about syncing is it also brings down all of the pictures and the documents and everything else and puts them into Family Tree Maker. Because Family Tree Maker used to be owned by Ancestry several years ago, and then they stopped supporting it, and McKeeve bought it out, and they now support Family Tree Maker 2019. Okay, and I'm not sure what the cost is, but it does give you a local copy. It brings everything down to your local hard drive so that if you do drop your subscription to Ancestry, you still have a copy of pretty much everything on your hard drive. But I really don't do any research in Family Tree Maker other than sync it and then save it to my other backup drives. Okay, so if you want a local copy, then there are other programs besides Family Tree Maker, but the thing that's nice about Family Tree Maker, it does sync very nicely with Ancestry and gives you a local copy of the program on your hard drive. Okay, so that's the nice thing. And there are different versions of Ancestry, I'm sure you're familiar with. You know, there's the basic version, which is only US. You know, you can only find US records. Oops, go away. What's going on here? Okay. And then there's the world version, which then allows you to see foreign countries and stuff if there are documents from there. And you know, the only problem with that is a lot of them are not translated to English, and sometimes it's hard to do a lot of research with documents if you're looking for an ancestor and it's in Italian and you don't really read Italian. It's hard to figure out what the document really is. I find a lot of the German documents have been translated. You know, a lot of the birth certificates and the church records and stuff like that have been translated into English. So sometimes it's hard to, easy to find German records. And I haven't really done a lot of other different countries because, you know, you tend to stick with what you are. Okay. So, and then there's the all access version. And what that gives you in addition to the world version is newspapers.com and fold 3, which is all the military records. Okay. At one time I had the all access, but what I found disappointing with that version was that a lot of things in newspaper.com, and I think that's owned by Ancestry also, but they wouldn't let you do certain things. You'd find a newspaper article, you'd want to bring the newspaper article down to your, you know, into your file, and there were certain things it would let me do. So what I found was I dropped my, and I didn't really use the fold 3 as that much for the military records. You know, do a lot of you use fold 3? No? Okay. That has, it's basically a lot of military records and stuff. You can go back and find your ancestors, you know, when they enlisted, where they served and all that other stuff. Okay. But I found that I wasn't using that, and I was disappointed in the links for newspaper.com. So I dropped down to World and then took out a separate subscription to newspapers.com, which gave me a few more features and was about the same price by dropping the World or the all access down to World, and then take a separate subscription to newspaper.com. You were paying about the same price as you were for the other one. And I felt I was getting more features out of it. Okay. So, okay. So all of you are Ancestry users, so you pretty much know how that. Now, Ancestry is expensive, as you know, and there are some discounts through like AARP and some other discounts that you can take out to try to lower the price. But sometimes I think most of us find that we do a lot of Ancestry for a month, and then suddenly we put it away for 5 or 6 months, but yet we're still paying for, the $200 a year or whatever for Ancestry. But lately I find I've been doing a lot of Ancestry, so I don't mind it so much. Okay. So now I highly recommend that you use dual screens. If everybody use dual screens, or you don't? Okay. Do you know what I mean by dual screens?
Maybe a laptop and a desktop at the same time.
You can have another monitor plugged into your laptop, or you can plug your TV in with an HDMI cable. You can plug an HDMI into your laptop. That's what we are right now. I'm plugged into HDMI to that projector. Okay. And so I've got a different screen than what you're seeing up there, because I've split my screens so that I can look at one screen and then I've got that screen up there. Okay, so each screen is independent, and what that allows you to do is bring up multiple copies of Ancestry on both screens, because I get very frustrated when I bring up like my DNA matches and my through lines, and I'm trying to go from tab to tab, and I lose what's over here. But if you plug into your TV or another monitor, okay, or you can also what I call split screen, okay, right. I mean, it's not as good because you're only taking up half the screen. But if you do dual monitors, I use when I'm. You have to excuse me because I'm trying to figure out which way my mouse has got to go to get to the other screen. So if I, oops, okay, there's my cursor. So if I, so I can do this, okay, and then just take up half a screen with two different browsers. Everybody know what a browser is? A browser is the window that gets you to the internet. That's Edge, Chrome, Firefox, all those are browsers, okay? A lot of times when I say the word browser, people look at me with, their eyes glaze over. But a browser is nothing but the window that gets you to the internet so that you can see what's in the internet. And you can also have multiple copies of Ancestry open in each browser. So you notice up here, I have two different copies. Whoops, there it is. I have two different copies of Ancestry opened up in each browser, and I can actually open up 5 or 6 copies of Ancestry in each browser. Okay, that allows me to jump from tab to tab, and I can, put whatever I want in one tab or the other. So I find that using dual monitors or even split screen to be very helpful when you're trying to do something in Ancestry. The only problem is it does limit, if you're using single screen, you're squeezing everything into half a screen on both sides. So it tends to cut down the amount of what you're seeing. But it's certainly easier to bring up something over here. So for example, oops, let me find my cursor. So suppose I wanted to do through lines. Does everybody know what a through line is? Okay. A through line is there are thousands of people out there who match up to you with a DNA. They're 4th, 5th, 6th cousins, first cousins, second cousins, whatever, and they match up to you with their DNA. Okay. I'm going to talk about through lines in detail a little bit later, but I just want to show you one of the advantages of using, dual monitors right now. So for example, suppose I wanted to do a through line. And so I bring up a through line here. And what a through line does, it takes all of the DNA matches out there for you, and it takes, through artificial intelligence, takes you back up to your common grandfathers, okay, your common ancestors. All right. So, and it's doing that with artificial intelligence, okay? So, and it's taken like their family trees, and it says, okay, they have the same 5th great grandfather as you do. So that takes their family tree up, and it takes your family tree up back to the common 5th great grandfather, or whichever one you want. Okay. So you notice that there are through lines for my parents, okay, and then goes to your grandparents, okay, and then it can go to your great grandparents, and it just keeps on going down, and this goes, my through lines go all the way back to, let's see, my 5th great grandmother. Okay, now I'm going to explain DNA to you a little bit better, and going back to a 5th great grandparent is about the best you're going to do with DNA. Okay, and I'll explain why that's true as we go through the presentation. But let's say I wanted to bring up a through line. And the other thing with through lines, oops, let me find my cursor again. If you put your cursor on it, it tells you how many people match up to that same great 5th great grandparent, whatever. So in this case,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
The DNA, I know you're going to talk about it, but are these people who got a DNA test?
Yes.
Okay.
These are all people who have taken DNA tests, and their DNA has been analyzed, and there are segments that match up to you, and they may be a fifth or sixth, could be anywhere from a first cousin to your parents to whatever. And they match up to you, and they also, all these people go back to this particular ancestor, okay? And we're going to talk about through lines a little bit later in detail, but I just want to show you one of the advantages of, here's my fifth great grandfather, and it says that there are 39 people who come back to that fifth great grandfather, okay? So, and we'll cover that in detail. But so let's say I wanted to bring up that through line. Oops, I keep losing the cursor. So I click on it, and okay, it says that, okay, Thomas Davis was my fifth, and then William Reverend Davis was my fourth, and there are 39 DNA matches coming back to him. So if I click on him, I see that, oh, these are his children, and these are all the DNA matches that come back to those children, okay? So you can see that, down here, John Nathan Nathaniel Davis, looks like he only has one DNA match, but Elizabeth has 4 DNA matches. That means there's 4 people who match back up to her, okay? And then as you go across, there's 13 there, and okay. And if I go across, and this is my line down Sarah Davis, and there's 18 DNA matches. So what that tells you is that all those people have through lines that come back up to that particular aunt or uncle of that person, all right? And then if I choose to click on one of them, so Martha Davis has 13 people under her, and her fourth great grandfather was William Davis, and that's also my fourth great grandfather. So through lines bring you up using DNA matches back up to, somebody, fifth or sixth great grandfather, where that tells me that I'm fairly confident that I'm going up the right tree. That's something a lot of times you don't know. Am I really, I took this information from somewhere saying that this was my fifth great grandfather, but if I never get a DNA match going back up to that person, how do I know? Then I'm not comfortable saying that that's really my fifth great grandfather. I may have made a mistake somewhere, right? But if I see all these aunts and uncles or children of William Davis who I have DNA matches coming back up to, then I can feel a little bit more comfortable that maybe, William Davis is my fifth great grandfather or fourth great grandfather. Okay, so that's what a through line does. All right, it uses their tree, their DNAs, and then follows their trees back up until they merge with your tree, and say that's a through line. But now over here, and so I switch to this tab here, and I want to go to my tree. Okay, and this is where having only half a screen, because now I kind of lost it up here. Let's go to my tree. So by splitting my screen like this, or using 2 monitors, when you're using 2 monitors, go to my tree, and I can do a tree search. If I can I think it's probably off the other side of the screen there. Okay, so here's your, if I can get it over there. Hang on, bear with me. It keeps wanting to go. Let me move it over here. Oh, that's because it was off the screen. That's why. Okay. Whoops, I really don't want to do that. I wanted to kind of keep it where I'm looking at a split screen, because that's the point of it. Okay, now let me drag this over. Okay, so this little icon here is your tree search, right? I want to search my tree. So if I type in William, Oops. Come back here. Davis. Okay. And I'm looking for the William Davis, who was about 1766, right? And so 1766 right there, that must be him. Now, notice there's two little marks next to that William Davis, okay? And one of the things I want to talk about is when you look at your family tree, how many of you use something to identify all your direct descendants? In other words, this is my parent, this is my grandparent, this is my great-grandparent, and then my great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and great-great-great-great-grandparents. And remember, every time you go up a generation, you get 4 more grandparents. And so it like multiplies as you go up. So your tree just keeps spreading out. And now you're looking at the tree and you say, which one of those is my grandparent? So one of the tricks that I use, okay, and I'll show you here. So that's the right William Davis. Okay, so I'm going to click on him, and that should take me in my tree to him. And then I'm going to click on it and look at the profile. Okay, all right. Now, so here's William Davis right here. And so now I can see by using a split screen that, okay, and I got to get this over to that side. It's a little tough sometimes here. Okay. All right. So, okay, so this says that Sarah Davis, and notice I go down my tree here, and there's Sarah Davis. Now notice what Sarah Davis has in her out there, okay? What do you see? You see a double asterisk and a triangle, okay? That double asterisk is how I mark my lineage, okay?
So you put those there?
I put those there in the where you normally put junior and senior and all that. I use that field, and for my direct descendants, I put a double asterisk in there. You can use any character you want, okay?
It's shorthand for this is mine.
Right, but when I bring up a record, now I'm looking down this person's tree, okay, and you notice that Thomas Davis also has a double asterisk, and Sarah Franklin also has a double asterisk, and then here's William Davis has a double asterisk, and his spouse, Mary Martha Burkhalter, has a double asterisk. So I know when I look at my tree that every one of those is one of my grandparents. They're a direct descendant. And what it makes it easier to do is like when I'm looking down their children, well, which one of those is my grandparent? Which one of those children is in my line? Well, oh, there's Sarah. She's got a double asterisk. So she is down the line. So I know that's the way if I'm trying to go down the tree, because if you ask me who my, 4th or 5th great grandmother was, since I have about 64 of them at that level, right? Which one of those was my grandparent of his children, I would be hard pressed to tell you. But I know as I scroll down that tree, well, there's Sarah Davis, and she has a double asterisk. Okay.
So, but on the left screen, the left thing, she does not.
No, because that's the artificial intelligence of the through lines.
Oh, okay.
That's not my tree.
This is your own.
This is the right side is my tree.
Okay.
The left side is using a through line such that you can see, but now using the dual screens, and that was the whole point I was trying to make here, is that, whoops, I need to spread that out just a little bit just to get the people on it. Okay, and I can now go across here and I can look at this screen and say, okay, George Davis was one of his children. Do I have George Davis here? Oh, yep, I have George Davis. Okay, so it allows me to edit on the right screen what I'm seeing on the through line on the left screen. Okay, and that's what using the dual screens can do for you, or using a split screen if you have to. So you can go from, I don't have to go oh gee, I got a tab over here. Oh, now what did the other screens say? I already forgot. So now I got to tab back to there. So if you're using a one screen and you got the through line on a tab and your person on a tab, then you're trying to go from tab to tab and then trying to remember in your head, well, what did the other screen say? But by doing it this way, I can look at the left screen, and as I go across here, I say, oh, Elizabeth Davis. Do I have Elizabeth Davis? Yep, I have Elizabeth Davis. There she is, 1801 to 1890, and that agrees. Now, what do you think that triangle means? Just if you had to guess from just what we've been saying, what do you think that triangle means? Any idea?
Related.
That they are a DNA line to me, right? So I know that all the people with triangles, I got those people because they are in a DNA through line to me. In other words, over here, those people, Elizabeth Davis has 4 DNA matches coming back up to William Davis, right? So in order to...
That's not that saying that they're related, that's science, that's DNA saying that they're related.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool.
Well, it's a combination of DNA and their family trees, and the DNA looks at a bunch of family trees, because sometimes when you go to their family tree, they don't actually go all the way back up, but the artificial intelligence has projected them to come back up to Elizabeth Davis, or either that or their tree does, one of the two, okay? But what I like to know is by looking at these people over here, that triangle to me is a thing that I created, and I put that also in the surname field where you put junior and senior and the third and the fourth and whatever. In fact, I think if some of these, if you look at them, they would say, I would normally type junior and then the triangle. Now the triangle is a special character because I didn't want to have to write out a whole bunch of letters. I just wanted a special symbol. So to get a triangle, all you have to do is hold down the Alt key and then type 30, okay? And that's in that paper there. Those are called alt characters. So if I open this guy up for edit, okay, and in fact, I'll show you while I'm here. Okay, so you see William Reverend Davis, and then I have a triangle and then the double asterisk, okay? Now, I could have also, suppose he was a junior. Oops, find it here. I mean, I could put junior here too, right? I use the same field. So I put junior, and now I want to put the alt character. So it's hold down the Alt key and then press 30. Whoops, must not have been on it. Alt 30. Whoops, why isn't that doing it? There it is. Okay, and you put a triangle. There's a whole array of characters you can use special characters, right? But they're all called alt characters. Every letter of the alphabet has an alt designation. I think like A is like alt 65 or something. I have to look them up. But I wanted one simple character there that I could look at that one character and know that that person is in a DNA line all the way up to that particular grandparent. Okay. Yes.
Say we were related, but obviously we don't have the same exact through line people.
Okay, go ahead.
Like you would have 2 dots or the 2 asterisks, and
Right.
maybe that's not my asterisk people.
No.
Can I see yours? Would that show up on mine?
No.
Or special codes?
If you actually went and looked at my record, if you looked at my tree, yes, you'd see them.
Okay.
I mean, that's just like typing junior, senior, the third, the fourth, whatever. I'm putting that double asterisk and that triangle in there just so that I can see that that's a direct descendant, right?
But she can see it
If she looked at my
can
tree,
see the asterisks.
in my tree,
But if I got a hint, would I see?
I don't know.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm not really
That's
sure.
good, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know if you would see it But if you look at my tree, obviously
Oh,
you
yeah.
see it because that's the same field. You'd put junior and senior and the third and the fourth and whatever. I just throw a couple of extra things in there because I find, to me, let me take the junior out of there because he's not really, as far as I know, he's not really a junior. Okay. But I know when I look at that field that one, there are DNA matches coming back to that person from other people. And two, that happens to be a direct descendant. That's one of my grandparents. Okay. Now, I don't know if you find that helpful or not, because when I try to go down a tree, and I'm looking, well, which one of those is mine? I like to look at, oh, there she is. And then when I click on her, and okay, and I go to her children, right? And of course, she's got the triangle and the asterisk up there. And I look down here, and of course, they have it. And now I go down the tree here. Oh, there's there's the next one down the tree, right? So I don't know if you find that helpful or not, but you start it yourself and you put a double asterisk or whatever character you want to use. You can pick any character you want. I just happen to choose double asterisks. And then as you go up the tree, you mark all your grandparents, and that makes them easier to go down the tree and find which one was actually yours, right? Because when I look at, and they all had 10 or 12 children back then, no such thing as birth control or anything else. So you notice that there were a lot of children, and the last one was one of my grandparents. Okay, I can tell because I look at see the double asterisk, and I also know that I have DNA matches to her because I see the triangle. Okay, so those are just two little things. The Ancestry doesn't tell you to do that. I just found with experience that I wanted to know going down a tree or up a tree, which ones were mine and which ones were aunts and uncles. Okay.
I've seen labels in there before, so I was wondering, like, if I
Oh.
took out the labels and.
You can put the labels in. No, I have the labels too. Notice I have common DNA ancestor, direct ancestor, and DNA connection. Okay. I have those too. But they don't show up down here, right? Notice they only show up on the person you're looking at. But if I didn't have that double asterisk there, I wouldn't have a clue which one was mine. Okay. That's why I use that in the surname field, because those labels you put at the top are nice, but they only show up when you're looking at the profile. Okay. Does that make sense? Go to the top. Yeah.
The green show up, I don't have a recollection when I go into it. The green
Okay.
show up, is that an automatic?
No, that's not automatic. Okay. We're going to talk about those. Those are called tree tags. Those are called tree tags. Okay. And we are going to talk about those. Okay. So I kind of jumping around. I hope I'm not jumping around too much for you. But so the whole point of this was by splitting your screen. And the problem is you have to make this one wide enough to get the people to show up. Okay. But you were asking what a through line was. And that's the through line is an artificial intelligence using the DNA, and it analyzes their trees and tries to bring them back to a common ancestor. Okay. So if I go back to all my through lines, let me find my cursor here. All right. And so you notice that this goes all the way to my 5th great grandparents. And with DNA, that's about as far as you're going to go. And I'll explain that later. Okay. And I will explain tree tags. I will get to tree tags. We're going to talk quite a bit about different kinds of tree tags and stuff. Okay. But you notice that, these are all of my 5th great grandparents that I have DNA matches for. Okay. And if I put my cursor over, it tells me how many DNA matches come back to that person. All right. So for that particular grandparent, I have 27 DNA matches coming back. For that one, I only have 8. I have 28. I have 6. I have 40 for him, and we're going to talk about him in particular. 40 for that one. And this is the husband and the wife. So here's the husband, here's the wife, here's the husband, here's the wife. Husband, if there is DNA matches. So sometimes if you see a husband, you don't see a wife, that means that nobody is matched up to her from a DNA standpoint yet.
If you don't have that name in your tree yet, will you get those DNA match hints? Like,
Ye-
will it show up on there?
You'll see a DNA match, but then you've got to figure out how are they related to you. Okay, and
I
that's
got a lot of those.
yes, we all do. I forgot how many DNA matches. I have 1,000 or two DNA matches. Okay, but how many are actually in my? Do I actually know who they are? Or have a clue? That's one of the things that I wrote to Ancestry about recently. Was I see a DNA match and I see their tree, and I want to know. I want to put this person's name in and my fifth great grandparent's name in and have it plot out how to get there. The Ancestry doesn't do that. And I have wrote them recently, and they said, "Oh, we send it over to our development team." I get that a lot. And I sent that over a long time ago, and I'm still waiting. Every now and then I send them an email and saying, "Gee, it would be nice if it could do this. Why can't it?" And they say, "Oh, that's a good idea. We'll send it to our development team." And I'm still waiting. Okay. But
Having, obviously you've used this quite a bit, so it says potential. How many DNA matches have you found that you feel confident? Like, does it just take 1 or 2 for you, or do you really like to have a bigger number?
oh, if I only see 1 or 2 or 0, I get concerned. We're going to talk about that when I talk about through lines and stuff. Well, we can talk about. A lot of times you go to somebody else's tree and says, "Oh, they say that's my fifth great grandmother or grandparent," and so I put it in my tree, right? And who's to know that they made a mistake or didn't make a mistake in their tree? And I just copied their error into my tree. So now we both have the same fifth great grandmother. And now I start looking at through lines, and I find that, okay, let's see, 1840, 8, 59, 61, 70, 67, 0. Oh, there's 1, 0. I have no DNA matches going back to that person. What does that kind of hint to you?
What do you do?
Or with the wrong name.
It could be a wrong name. So I need that's where you have to do some research and find out. Now, I may have gotten that name from somebody else's tree. Okay? We all do that. We look at somebody else's tree and we take it for gospel. But you got to remember, this was back in 1758. What were the records like in 1758? Not very good. And somebody found a link somewhere, and they linked up to that person, and they put it in their tree. And maybe I looked at their tree and said, okay, I don't know how they got that name. And particularly if you look at a record in somebody else's tree and you see no sources at all, the name got popped in there, no sources. You kind of have to be skeptical. So here's a person with no DNA matches. Okay. In fact, if I look at Mary, I keep losing my cursor here. It says no DNA matches. Okay. The only one that comes she's in my tree and nobody else's tree, and there's no DNA matches. And
When you say source, where would that be for Mary Daniels? Where would it say the source? Would it say-
if I went to her in my tree, let me see. Okay, let's do the tree search on the other side.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's different sources. It came from a census. It maybe come from another family tree, but I'm kind of skeptical whether Mary Daniels is really my fifth great grandmother, and I need to probably do some more research to try to figure that out. So when I have matches that somehow I got her name And I'd have to bring her up over here. So here's where you can do the dual screen. And I can, oops, go to the top here. And there's that little tree search right there. So let's go to Mary Daniels. If I can type. And I'm looking, whoops, did I spell it wrong? Must have. Mary, Daniels, DA. And the thing about a search, if you type a character wrong, it filters out. What you type is what you get. So if you're not typing it correctly, then you're not going to get it. Daniels. Oh, Mary Daniels, 1758. Yep, there she is right there. Notice I have a double asterisk by her. And, says I got global index for burials, C, another select. Okay, there's an ancestry tree. And then I also have a web link to the Rivas family genealogy, so I got that name from supposedly, I have a couple of sources for it, but I'm questioning how valid those sources are because out of all the people taking a DNA test, nobody matches up, okay, which makes me a little skeptical that I have no DNA matches to her, and I need to do a little bit more research to verify, that she's actually one of my grandparents, okay? And who's down the line from her? Lucy Rivas, right? Yes.
I guess I have a problem though, because they didn't have a tree in that video.
Well, an adoptee would not be a DNA match, right? It could be, but no, if there's no DNA matches, they are not related to you. They are, an adoptee wouldn't be a DNA match. Well, they can be in the tree, they could be an adoptee, but I'm saying she's it's got a double asterisk. Right. Supposedly my DNA, but yet nobody else matches to her, which makes me question. It's only my DNA is because I said that she's in my line. And when it analyzed my tree, it's the only tree that it analyzed that she shows up there with a DNA match. So you have to kind of question whether that's really true or not true. Does that make sense? Or okay. Yeah, she could have been. Right. She could have been a second or third wife. Right. Right. I mean, the husband might be in the tree, but like you said, she could be a second wife, and really his other wife who may have died or whatever and had children. And I found that. I've had to actually delete people out of my tree that I found that, I thought she was my grandmother, but then I found out he was married before that, and that child was really my grandparent.
Do
Right.
you keep everybody in the tree?
Like,
Even if there's second and third marriages, like you keep them
Yes.
all? Okay.
yes, I show all the marriages, and I try to show all the children who are under that marriage.
Right.
And there's two or three ways of doing that. If you can find when they were married and when the children were born, then you can kind of put the children under even though you might find a tree that, they list 5 children, and some of those children were born before they were married, okay? And therefore, maybe there was another wife before that had those couple of children that were put there. And maybe and I've come across that I had the wrong grandparent under the wrong mother. I had the right grandfather, but then the wife that was actually my grandmother was not the one that the child was actually under. And so
So you include adopted kids as well?
I include everybody I flag them as adopted. Okay. Like, for example,
So then that DNA, the double asterisk, is not going to be there?
no, because they would not be a DNA match to me. And therefore, they're not really my grandparent or adopted. I guess I'm not quite sure where the adopted comes in with a grandparent, but maybe a different spouse that he had that I don't know about yet. And that was really my grandmother. Now, Family Tree may have showed her as his wife, and she was maybe, and they had a bunch of kids together. but there were 2 or 3 kids born to another mother who was probably my real grandmother. So I question the fact that she may have been another wife, but not necessarily my grandmother and not DNA related to me. So therefore, I probably need to find out who the other wife was, what her name was, and then move the double asterisk to her. And then she's just another spouse of, that particular grandparent. Okay. So what I'm trying to prove with this is that by using the left screen or a separate monitor, it's even better with a separate monitor if you put 2 monitors next to each other, where you keep the through lines over here and then what you're actually looking at over here, so you can edit it. So I can go down this line and then I can say, okay, Mary Daniels had Lucy Rivas, and over here, there's Lucy Rivas. So I can now click on Lucy Rivas, and going down that line, Samuel Haynes was the next one. Here's Samuel Haynes. So I'm looking one screen to the other, not trying to tab from tab to tab, right? I go crazy when I'm trying to do it with one screen and tab to tab, and I can't remember what was on the other screen by the time I switch tabs. So splitting the screen or dual screens is, I highly recommend you do that. Okay. And then under Samuel Hayes, well, there was George Hayes. And where's George Hayes? He's got a double asterisk too, right? So this is happens to be down my line. Okay. So, and I know that, and I can look at the date. By the way, when you're looking at the through lines, if you, sometimes when you look, if you click on that, it brings up additional information and tells you what trees and stuff they may come out of. Okay. But also it may show you like a middle name or something like that that's not in the left. Okay. Let's just look at one of these. So if I click on, here's Samuel W. Let me keep losing my cursor. Okay. So here it just says, if I close this, I just want to close this for a second. This says Samuel W. Haynes. Okay. But if you click on the name in a through line, it may give you more information than what you see in that little box down there. So you may get a middle name, you may get additional information in there by clicking on that particular box in the through line. All right. So I find that very helpful because particularly like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Click the wrong box. Okay. And notice, most of you use the tags on the top there, the shortcuts, the favorites. No? Do you know what that is? Whoops. Why? What happened here? What's that? Did something
Is
happen?
there like a remote for this? I'm not sure how to use this one.
Yeah, I don't either.
Maybe
Hopefully. What's that?
You unplug the HDMI.
I'm plugged in. It suddenly said locking, and then it, I don't know. You know what? I wonder, strip phone? No. You know what? This probably, the power strip wasn't on. I ran out of battery. Oops. Okay.
By the way, the whole tip on Chrome, go to the top right of the city snowman, the 3 dots,
Yeah.
and go to history, it'll say recently closed tab, and reopen the window, you can close.
Okay. All right. So anyway, while I'm waiting to get booted back up here. Okay. Any other questions of what the through lines are for? Does that clear up what a through line is and how to use it? We'll get more into a little bit more into that into DNA. Yes.
So you can't do through lines so much as you do DNA test, like I do the DNA test, and it's just DNA.
Right.
So I don't have access to that.
You have, if you don't have, but they're not matching up to anything.
Right.
There's no DNA for them to match up to. Okay. Any other questions while I'm getting booting up here? I didn't realize the power strip wasn't on. I ran out of juice.
I have a great grandfather who was adopted, and I have like my aunt and my cousin are related to him, but I can't go from there. I don't know how to find out anything about his adoption, where he came from.
Well, the thing about adoption, I have through this, I found out that my father had a half sister I never knew about. Okay. Because when my father was growing up, my grandmother died, and then a year later he married another woman and had 2 children with her. Okay. And I didn't know it. My father never talked about her. I never knew anything about her. Although I was looking at a census for 1940, and I saw, well, here's my grandfather, and here's another woman he married. And then on the census, it showed a daughter and a son, which I'd never heard of, right? And something my father never talked about. Well, this woman that my grandfather married had several children. She adopted out every one of them. Okay, she had like 6 children, and she adopted out every one of them right after they're born. And my grandfather died like a year after she was born. And so on the 1940 census in April, she showed up living in my grandfather's house, along with all my father and my uncles and aunts. On the May census, she showed up living with my uncle on the census. So she actually got recorded on 2 different censuses in 1940. Right. So on the April census was taken, she was living with my grandfather. And on the May census, she was living with my uncle. And my grandfather died, and then the woman that he married gave up the 2 children, and one went to my uncle, and then the son went to my aunt's parents. Okay, that's kind of confusing, but so my father's half sister went to my uncle on the Hardy side. She went to the Hardy family, and then the wife's parents adopted the boy. Now, when you get adopted, your birth records get totally changed, and your original birth record gets hidden, right? So, as an adopted child, you can't get back to the original birth certificate until that child has the records released and unsealed. But so the only record I could find for my half sister was her name was Hardy, not Krauser, right? And of course she was adopted out. She was given up for adoption right after, within a month, right after her birth or shortly after. And then her brother was taken in by the other wife's parents. And I just found out about them, like a couple of years ago, because I found a newspaper article through newspaper.com, which talked about these 6 children who found each other.
Oh, wow.
And they were all adopted out. And then they didn't know about each other, because she would go into another man, have more children, and immediately adopt them out, and go into another man and immediately adopt them out. She was not a very nice woman, it seems like, okay? But they all found each other. But anyway, this Velma is my half aunt, my father's half sister, and I found out she's alive still, and 86 years old, working in Walmart, down in Texas. And I actually got in touch with her family, with her daughter, who would be my cousin, my first cousin I never knew about, who lived 30 minutes from where I grew up. Never knew about her. Okay. And what I did was I got her mother, Velma, my aunt, to submit a DNA sample. I paid for it. I sent her a sample. I sent her 2 samples, one for me to have and one for her family to have. Okay. And I do that while we're talking about DNA, let me just mention that. If you have parents or aunts and uncles that are still alive, or even grandparents that are still alive, it's nice to get a DNA sample from them while they're still here. Because I wish I had my father's DNA or my wife's father's DNA, but I don't. We didn't get them. I've got her mother, I got my mother, and then I got my father's half sister to take a DNA test, take 2 of them actually, one that I could have in my tree and one that they could have in their tree. Yes. No, it's a saliva sample. Well, at least Ancestry, you get a tube and you fill it with saliva and you send it in. Okay. And generally the DNA for Ancestry is like $99 for the regular DNA. But every holiday, like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, and all of them, you get the emails that say, oh, $59 special. Okay. So I usually wait till they go on sale.
3 months.
Huh?
Plus 3 months of world access.
Yeah.
That's how I did it. So I got the 3 months and the DNA all for $59.
Okay. Well, I'm already on there, so they don't give me that deal. But anyway, I recommend that if you have older relatives that are still around, that you try to get their DNA. Okay. And let me get back into genealogy here. And the reason I say that, remember, I can open up multiple tabs of Ancestry. But I don't know, a lot of people don't realize you can have open Ancestry 10 times if you want, because I've got it open 4 times up here right now. Okay, in 2 different browsers. Yes.
I have a really weird question.
Yep.
So I have grandparents still alive.
Yep.
So if I got their DNA sample,
Yep.
and you said you wanted one for your half and
Right.
your tree, I'm just wondering what that truly means and what for your tree means.
Okay. Ancestry, if you order a DNA kit, you have to go in and set up a free Ancestry profile. So you go in, you create a tree, and you put yourself and your parent, mother, and father in, and then you send in your DNA sample, and then you get after they receive the DNA sample, it takes 2 to 3 weeks for them to analyze it and give you the results back. Okay. I don't understand that, because I don't understand how something that costs $59 can be so intensive on their end. I mean, $59 is 30 minutes worth of work, right? But it takes about 3 weeks once they get the sample for you to actually get the results back and say, okay, here you are, this is what you are, and then you start getting all these DNA matches, okay? I don't understand why it takes so long, why it's so intensive for $59. That makes no sense to me at all, but that's the way it is. But I ordered 2 kits, right? So one, they had to go in and create a profile, a kit with a separate email address for her on their family. And I had to go in and create a fake email address for her and then set up an account for her in Ancestry also. So actually there's 2 accounts for Velma, all right? One is for them, that they used her email address, and one is that I created a fake email address for her. I mean, it's still a valid email address, but it's just not one she would ever use, okay? And then I had to activate the one kit under my email and activate the other kit under her email. And then they both went through the system, and then they both came back. And in fact, let me show you something here. So if I go to DNA matches, all right, there's my son, my daughter, my mother, and my cousin, half brother, okay, Velma, half aunt, okay. And you notice here's Velma, half aunt. So there's actually 2 DNA matches for her. One's from her profile that I created for them. Now they can start filling in a family tree for themselves. And the fake tree that I started so that I could have her DNA to put in my tree. Okay, I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that's the way Ancestry works. I can't go to her DNA and put 2 DNA samples into her profile. They don't let you do that. Okay, so you had to actually create 2 separate accounts and put 1 DNA sample in one and 1 in the other. Now, then what you can do is they can assign you as the manager of the DNA. So then I went into the fake DNA or Ancestry account for Velma that I created. And then I went in and said, okay, make Tom the manager of my DNA. And that puts it into my tree, right? So even though there's still this one tree out there that has Velma and her mother and father, it's got 3 people in it, small tree. But I put the DNA sample, activated it into that account, and then you go in there and you assign them as then you assign someone as to be the manager of the DNA. So you notice that she is, and notice that, well, one is 903 CMs and one's 901. They're both, we have 13% shared DNA. Now remember, she's only related to me on my grandfather's side, right? Not on her mother's side, right? You know, the Verlin, who was his wife, not related to me at all, no DNA. So, but she has 50% more Krauser DNA than I have. Okay, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. But so she has more Krauser DNA than I have. Okay, and it's probably a good time to talk about what that means. Yes.
I wonder what companies like Ancestry.com share DNA information.
They don't. Like if you get a 23andMe test, you can't bring it into Ancestry. Ancestry doesn't accept 23andMe DNA samples. So you have to get a Ancestry DNA sample and also 23andMe doesn't accept Ancestry. Now other programs may, okay. I don't know all the programs, but some programs will take DNA from anybody. Okay, but Ancestry and 23andMe, you'd take an Ancestry DNA. And what I started to say a minute ago was with the Ancestry, when it does go on sale, okay, you can go to like Amazon and order Ancestry. And if it's $59 on special at Ancestry, it's $59 on Amazon. And if you have Amazon Prime, you don't pay the $10 shipping, where with Ancestry, you pay the $10 shipping on top of the $59. And plus, it normally gets to your house in about 1 or 2 days with Prime, where Ancestry can take a couple of weeks to get the DNA test. Now, I also just ordered another couple of DNA tests for my wife's uncle, because her mother lives with us. I have her DNA, but she has one brother still alive. He's a bunk, right? And I want his DNA. So I just ordered 2 more kits. So I'm going to have him send in 2 kits also, one for their family and one to put in my tree. Because if you go up, oops, find the cursor. If you go up here, say view another test, these are the people that I manage. Okay, there's me, my mother, my wife's mother, her brother, my daughter, my son, my wife, Velma, okay, and Daniel Walters is my daughter's boyfriend, okay. But I manage, I own this test, but when my wife submitted a test, I had to create a fake account. I had to create a separate account for her too. because I can't put her DNA into my account. She has to have her own account. She'll never use it, but I put it into her account, I activated it, and then when the results came back, I went in and made myself the manager of her DNA.
She doesn't pay a subscription. She just
No,
dumps her
she-
in there.
Yeah, she has a free account. Yeah, she doesn't really use it, but you have to create at least a free account to get your DNA activated. All right. But then once it's activated, you can go into that account and then assign someone to manage it. And then so I now become the manager of my wife's DNA, and then I go attach it to her in my tree, just like I attach Velma's to hers and her mother's to her. And I can then look at different people. So for example, if I go to Velma, who's my aunt, okay, and I look at her test, all right. As soon as it comes up here, well, there's Velma. Oh, looky there. She's got a twin. You know, why does she have a twin? Because we send in 2 DNA samples, and Ancestry doesn't know, as far as they know, that's her identical twin, right? Because she has 3,489 CMs. We'll talk about what that is in a minute, and 100% shared DNA. So that's like that Velma is the other Velma's identical twin. Okay, but so she's got a match to herself, but the Ancestry is like she's the identical twin. Okay, and she's 100% match, right? And then Jane Griffith is one of the other ones that got adopted out, okay, who found each other after many years. Okay, that's one of her half sisters who also happened to get a DNA, and also Patsy Bazemore was another one that was adopted out by Verlin, okay, and she is a half sister, okay. So you notice that they're all about 1,700, okay. Notice to herself she's 3,400, and her half sisters are 1,700. So what does that kind of tell you? 3417 is 50%. Remember I said you lose 50% each generation. Of course, they had different fathers, right? Same mother, different fathers. So therefore, she only has 1,700 and something CMs, which is how they measure the segments of DNA segments that match up to her. So her half sisters have about half the segments of her so-called identical twin, right? Because she has, so that's a pure match, about 3,500, CMs is like 100% match. And then that would be identical twins, basically. And then half siblings, so they have half of it. They have the different mother or different fathers, okay? And so here's a half brother. Okay, that was another one of the, so again, it's about close to 1,700 DNA matches, okay? And then I would get into first or second cousins. Now with matches, depending on what the person wants to share, whether they actually want to put their name there or a username or whatever, you don't really know who they are or what they're doing, okay? So, and then of course there's me. I'm a half nephew, and I only have 903 segments that match up to hers, and so I'm like a half nephew. All right, and then you can just keep going down and down and down and down. And a lot of these people I know, and a lot of these people I don't know, and a lot of these people will be related to Verlin, the mother, and they're not related to me at all because I've got her DNA up, right, not mine. So a lot of these people may or may not be related DNA-wise to me. They could be real on the mother's side, going up the mother's tree. So they're not necessarily my people, okay? And some of these names I recognize, some of them I don't. But, you get down to second or third cousins, and, and it just keeps right on going. Now, remember, though, she's got 50% more Krauser DNA than I do, okay? And it's probably a good time to talk about that. So do you realize, okay, when you were born, you got half your mother's DNA and half your father's DNA, right? So which part of your mother, which part of your father? It's a gambling game, okay? Because if you got the exact same DNA, every brother and sister would look alike, right? So the way I like to explain DNA is if I go look at my percentages, or let me just go up and let me compare myself to Velma. I can compare my DNA to Velma. So here we go. We're comparing Velma Krauser and Thomas Krauser. Okay. And then it shows me a tree, right? A linked tree. And this is where you can start taking that DNA matches tree and start going up it. And you see that I have 17,813 people in my tree, right? And then they can click on my tree. Suppose this was Velma looking at my tree, and she can start going up my tree to see how we match. But I can also look at ethnicity, all right? So this says that, okay, here's how Velma and me compare where we came from DNA, all right? So it says England, Northwestern Europe, I'm 23%, she's 30. Germanic Europe, this is the one that shocked me, okay? My last name is Krauser, German. I always thought I was German, you know. Grew up thinking I was German. Take a DNA test, look at that. 2%, okay? 2% German, all right? And of course, she's 24% German, okay? Now, how much of that she got from my grandfather and how much of it she got from Berlin, I don't know, okay? And then I'm 34% Scottish, she's only 19%, 11% Eastern Europe. Now, look up here. See that Eastern Europe and Russia, Eastern Europe stretches over into Germany too, the way they do these geographical DNA things. So that 11% could be, right in here in Germany too, right on this border here. So if you add the 2% and the 11%, you get 13%, okay? Now, so let me explain. This is a very simple analogy. Suppose each one of those colors, I had a jar of marbles, and 23 of them were one color, right? Two of them were one color, 34 were a different color, 11 were a different color, 1 was a different color, 12 was a different color. Sweden and Denmark, and Norway, okay, were all different colors, all right? And they're in a jar. So there's all these colored marbles in a jar. Now here's the mother, and she's got colored marbles in her jar too, right? Now we're going to take those two jars and we're going to shake them up and we're going to pour 50 marbles from each jar into your jar, right? Which marbles go into your jar? What color marbles are you going to wind up with? Do you know? No. And that's why if you have 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, they all look different. They all have different characteristics because you don't know which marbles you got out when you poured them into that jar to make one jar of 100 marbles, which colors you got from your father and which colors you got from your mother. You got 50 of them, but which colors did you get? Who knows? Okay, so get back over to my other screen there. But anyway, so I can look at the ethnicity for each DNA match that's on that tree. And I can bring it up and I can compare how our DNA matches go down the line, right? But now, so now you take your jar that you got 100 marbles from 50 from your mother and 50 from your father. Now you've got your wife who has a jar of marbles, all different colors, and your jar with all different colors. And now you pour it into 50 from each into your kid's jar. Which marbles went into there, right? Random, I mean, it's not totally random, but it's random. So you find out that you can have, you lose 50% of your parents. So for example, suppose my great-grandfather who came over from Germany in about 1883, name was Krauser, and I assumed he was pure German, but more than likely he was he was German, and he was also Eastern Europe and Russia, okay, because that was sort of they overlap the regions there. So that adds up to, but let's say he started out at 100%, okay, and let's say that each generation as you go down the tree got exactly 50% of it. So my grandfather was 100. How much was my father? 50. And then how much am I? 25. And then my kid is 12 and a half. So every generation you lose half of your DNA. So if you can get an older ancestor to do a DNA test, you gain back that 50% above you. That's why I encourage you, if you've still got older relatives, to try to get them to submit a DNA test. Okay. Now, so 25, but it says I'm only 2% German. Actually, it was my great-grandfather, not my grandfather. So actually it was 150. I should be around 12.5%. Okay, German. If I got 100% all the way down the tree, but you've got to add, but that's assuming they were pure Germanic, okay? But they probably weren't. They were probably the Eastern Europe and Russian. So it went 150, 25, 12.5, okay? So when you add 11 and 2, you get 13. So that's not bad, okay? But I'm not pure German. Right? I'm only 2% German and 11% Eastern Europe and Russia. Okay, does that confuse anybody? Does that make sense? Man, and the marble theory it's just an analogy, but you can kind of see if you're pouring marbles of different colors into jars, that which marbles you get, you don't really know, right? Okay, but it works out that, okay, if you add the 2% and the 11%, that's 13. That's pretty close to the so-called 12.5, theoretically, that you would get from your great-grandfather to your grandfather to your father to yourself, right? But remember, you lose 50%. So now Velma, she should have, if I've only got 13, she should have 25, right? So if I can use her, I can get further up the tree, because now she can go up the tree further, because it's the halving theory. So you go from 100 to 50 to 25 to 12 to 6 to 3 to 1 to nothing. And that's why I say you can only go up about 6 grandparents, because after 6 grandparents, that 100 went to 50 to 25 to 13 to 6 to 3 to 1 to, well, non-detectable. So you can only go up about 6 generations before you lose the DNA where you can no longer rely on it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Oops, where's my? Okay. Kind of bouncing all over the place. I hope you don't mind, but I'm trying to cover a lot of different things here. Let's see. So anyway, so with the DNA, you can look at any DNA matches and the ethnicity. And let's go to somebody I don't know over here. So let's go back up. So we'll go back to Velma and whoops, back. Okay, do another test. No, we're going to stay there. But let's go to one of these people I don't know. Okay, and this is the first or second cousin. I have no idea whether they're from her mother's side or my grandfather's side. But let's just look at that person. So I click on that person, and that person only chose to use a username, so you don't really know what their real name is. Okay, so here's Velma, and so there's this person's tree, Okay, and you notice they're private because if you're living, you're private. If you don't share out the fact that, you can see living people on your tree. And I don't really know unless I start going up this tree. Oh, it says William Wallace Watkins and Sarah Jones Taylor, okay, great grandmother, okay, are common ancestors for her and WW, whoever WW is, okay, by using the DNA match. But I can also look at their ethnicity, okay, and I see that, WW is 37 and only 1% Germanic and 24% in Scottish, and so you can go down. You can compare their ethnicity to whoever you've got up here. I'm looking at Velma right now, so I see her ethnicity compared to this DNA match. Where they match up, and so that's showing you right there. And you notice that there's 7% shared, 473. Now remember, 3,500 was like 100%, okay, and then half of that was 17, and half of that's like 9, and you keep going down as you go down the match. And across 21 segments, okay, segments are stretches of DNA that they match up to, okay. I don't truly understand everything there is to know about DNA. There is, you can, go online and you can read about it and stuff, all right? The when you say this one?
No, the one above, right in there.
Oh, the 473? Right. 473 tells me that they're down about 3 or 4 generations, right? Because you went from 3,500 to 1,700 to 900 to 400, and then the next one will be about 200, okay? Right? Segments that still match. Okay. Let's see. Just trying to get back over to here. Oops. I keep losing which screen I'm on. Where am I? Where's my cursor? Can't find my cursor. This way? No, maybe this way. No. All right. Well, okay. So, do you understand? Does the DNA make a little bit of sense to you as to what DNA does for you and why it's, if you can, to get your oldest living relatives' DNA, because that gets you a lot further up the tree. With Velma's DNA, I've been able to go like 2 more generations up than what my DNA goes, because you got to remember, she's about 2 halves less than me, so I can get up further, all right, in the tree. Why am I not getting over to here? I'm losing my, okay, where's my cursor? Well, for some reason, trying to get back to this screen here so I can go down and see where I'm at. Well, if that doesn't work, go to my, no, I'm trying to get to the other monitor here. And okay, let me just, okay, using dual screens we've talked about splitting the screen with browsers. Ancestry, most of you've used Ancestry, right? Quite a bit, so you know how the pages are laid out. Okay, so if I go up to a page, I'm going to expand this screen out so that we have a full screen up here. Okay, so so this is Lucy Rivas, the birth and the death, and she's a direct ancestor. And you had asked me about those green tags before. Okay, those are called tree tags. Okay, and if you click on any of these boxes down here that says View Comments right here, all right, and you click on that, it's going to bring up a screen on the side over here, and it's going to be my tree tags. All right, and if you click on that, that's the one that I have there. Let me just edit it here. Okay. Tree tags are what those green boxes are that you put on the screen there. So you can use some of the common, the standard tags that are in there, okay? The DNA tags. So they have a common DNA ancestor, a DNA connection, and a DNA match. So if it's a common DNA ancestor, that's one that would also have the double asterisk, right? They're a grandparent. A DNA connection means that there are DNA through lines coming through that person, right? So Lucy Rivas is a direct ancestor. She would also be a common DNA ancestor. So if I clicked here, I assume she is, it puts the green tag under her name. Okay, common DNA ancestor. All right. And so there are those tags. There are life experience tags, enslaved person, free person, I've used very few of these tags. Okay, relationship tags. There is adopted, into this family, out of this family, died young, direct ancestor, multiple spouses. There's all different custom tags that you can use. Okay, actively researching. I use unverified a lot. So I may put unverified up there, right? If I'm not really sure that I'm using the information, but I haven't verified it, so I may tag it with unverified. Because then later you can search on unverified and go back and try to do some further research on it. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes I use trees. A lot of times the hints, you know what the hints are? Yeah, you've used the hints, but you got to be very careful with hints, because there may be a Joe Smith born about the same year, but in 15 different states. Which one was yours? You don't know. So you have to go back to censuses and stuff like that to try to figure out which Joe Smith was your Joe Smith and so forth, right? The further research, that's hard to actually define. A lot of times I may find a newspaper article or something, or a census. I use a lot of census data, okay, trying to find people, particularly back after 1850, okay? And after 1850 is when they actually started listing people-owned censuses. They actually listed names, okay? But you have to be careful because a lot of the census, as you know, it was phonetic. Because back in 1850, not a lot of people, you ran into a lot of people who couldn't read or write, right? And they probably didn't even have calendars to know what year or day it was or anything. They lived down on a farm somewhere and they didn't read or write and they didn't have calendars. So when the census taker came by, said, "My name is Krauser, Crouser, Krauser," okay? Because whatever they heard was what they wrote down, and since you didn't read or write, you didn't correct them, you didn't tell them. Well, how old are your kids? Oh, well, let's see. Joe's about 15. He was born. So and so's about 12. If you have to ask you how old your kids are, would you know exactly what year and month they were born off the top of your head? Probably not. And probably it was the wife that the census taker was talking to, because the husband was probably out plowing the South 40 or something. And whether she knew all the birth dates and years and what the kids' names were or whatever, you don't know. So sometimes you have to take censuses and stuff with a grain of salt, but their censuses have a lot of purpose to them also. Okay.
You brought that up, and that's one reason I'm here tonight. I wanted to find the 1910 census, specific information like census I want. Where can you find that? Now it's showing up with these little things you click, but I want to actually go to that source.
Okay.
How do I
I
go
found
to
in 1910, it was damaged.
No, the 1890.
1890.
1890.
In 1910, I had a couple of things.
Well, okay, in this document, I talk about that. I give you, before 1850, they only listed the male head of household, right? And they said, okay, he had 2 children between 5 and 10, 2 children between 10 and 15,
Male and female.
male and female,
Yeah.
right? Okay. I have what are called census masters that I can give you a copy. That's one of the things I want to put on the website, but they won't let me put a Word doc on the file. I can put the PDFs on, but let me show you what I do with. I've created these documents. Okay, this is called the 1840 census. No names. Okay, but they took certain data, right? And they did a census. And so here's one of my ancestors, James Votaw, in 1840. And if you want, I can get these documents to you if you want to send me an email, and I can send you a zip file which has the actual Word files. And then what I do is it's okay, 1840, I found this census for James Votaw. He was the head of household, and it says, okay, there was 1 under 5, and 1 5 to 9, and 1 15 to 19, 1 40 to 49, and here's another one under 5 female, 2 females 10 to 14, and 1 30 to 39. So now I take that document, and it's in a Word file, that I can't put up on the website because they don't put Word files up there. They're supposed to put PDF files, but then you got to print it out and handwrite them all in. So then I go to James Votaw. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to switch this over to your screen. Hang on. You don't know what I'm talking about because, oops. There we go. All right. Okay. Whoops. I forgot you're not looking at my screen. Okay. I'm sorry. Apologize for that. I'm looking at it, but you can't see it because it's on the other screen. So this is an example of an 1840 census master that I created. So I took the data that they gathered for the 1840 census, and I created a Word file that allows you to go back. You find the 1840 census for James Votaw, and it said, okay, and these columns are what's on the census. It says, okay, he was the head of household, and I put down that he was, 1798 to 1853. He was 42 years old when the census was done. All right. And so if there are males, if I look at a record, I look at my profile for James Votaw, and it shows all of his kids, right, that I think are all of his kids. And I say, okay, I've got Francis Votaw was born in 1844. That was after the census was done. So I add him up here on the top of it. Males born after census. Male and Antonine Votaw, 1847, born after the census. Okay, so they shouldn't be on the census, but I put them up there just so I see where they are. And then I said, okay, they said there was 1 male under 5. Okay, now here's Alfred, 1834 to 1854, and he was 6 years old when the census was taken. But on the census, they listed him as under 5, and that could be a mistake, right? But because this is based on the birth date that I found somewhere else, not what was taken on the census. And then there was a Thomas Votaw who was 1832. He was age 8. So, and I also put down the years for you so you know that, okay, 1834, you put him in this block here. 1832, you put him in this block here. He's in that block also. So I put a note up here that this one that was under 5 was probably Alfred. He's just in the wrong block on my profile. Does that make sense? Okay. And then I go down, okay, William Votaw was 19 years old. Okay. And sure enough, he shows up here. And then they said there was one between 40 and 49, where that was James Votaw. Well, he was 42. So he shows up here. So I put him there. And I go down to the females. It said, okay, there was one under 5 that was Mary. She was 1 year old. There was 2 supposedly between 10 and 14. So I had 2 in my profile for James Votaw that was 12 and 14, right? And then I've got an Angeline Votaw who's not on here, but she was 16. So back in 1840, 16 was probably married, right? And out of the household. So she was gone, right? Not in the profile. And then I got an Isabel, who was 21. Well, she was probably married and gone too. So I say probably left home, all right? And then Nancy Biddock, who would be my grandmother, one of my great grandmothers, she was 36, and yep, she falls there. So does that 1840 census look like that was James Votaw to you by looking at that, this sheet? You know, it looks pretty close to me. I can explain the people who are not there or maybe in the wrong block.
Yeah, I compared 1850, thought I found 1840, and just backed my way into it to see who was still in the household, you would think.
Right. Well, that's sort of what I did
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
But I do it with a sheet
Right.
that says this is what the census showed, this is what my profile shows, and by comparing the two, I'm fairly confident this looks like that was the 1840 census for James Votaw. Okay. Now I'm trying to put those Word files up so you can actually print it out. But when you take the master, you don't want to use the master. You want to save the master as the person, right? And then fill in the person, keep the master blank. All right, does that make sense? So you want to keep the master pure. So I have a folder called masters, and then I have a folder called data, and under data, or census data, and I would have a folder for James Votaw, and then, put the sheet that I filled out there. Now what you can do is you can take this and print it out as a PDF file, right? Okay, because you don't want to store Word files in Ancestry. You want to print them out as a PDF. You know how to do that? How to print as a PDF from your printer, use Microsoft Print to PDF. And then you put the PDF file up in the profile under the gallery. Put it in the gallery, all right? You don't want to put a Word document because then it has to be downloaded and opened in Word versus keeping it up on, if you send a PDF file up to the gallery, they can open it directly. So then I put a copy of the 1840 census, this, up in the gallery, okay, for James Votaw, and also for all of his kids, right? So I would add a record under each kid, and you know how to do that, how to add people to a gallery item. You click on it and you say add individuals, and you add their names, right? You also do that with other censuses. Sometimes I find that censuses, if you do a census, that it only puts the father and the mother in and drops all the kids off and doesn't put all the kids, put them on the census. And then then what you do is you go back to the person that it did put it in, like the father. You view that census.
And then it already says saved, so how do you do it?
What's that?
I tried to do that. I've gone back to the census and it already says it's saved, so how do you save?
Oh,
it?
well,
What's the
okay.
second?
All right, let me minimize this for a second. Okay, so let me go to somebody who's actually, we have a census on. Okay, whoops, hang on. Go back to view entry. Here we go. Okay. Whoops, hang on. Let me go back to my home person here. Okay, I'm just going to show you a quick example. All right, suppose I look at my grandfather here, and I do his profile. Okay, and I look at the 1900 census, and I view it, all right? And this is another suggestion that I've made to Ancestry. Okay, so if I view the record, okay, so I come up here and view record, all right? Okay, now let's say I wanted to add that census to Clay, right? So I click on Clay and I switch to Clay, right? And then I come down here and I click save to someone in your tree, so Clay H. Blevins. And this is also where it helps to have the dual screens up so that you know what, if you got the,
It must be, it's not a hint that came up for me, it's something I found, and then once I save it, it didn't seem to like me to save it to a second tree, or
second person. Well, it's
So maybe that's just something.
Okay.
I have to find.
all right, but so if I click save to someone in my tree and I put Clay, Clay, Blevins, Blevins, okay, I can choose him and it will save that record to that person also, okay? And you should be able to do the same thing with anything in the gallery, okay? So if I go back to that person and I come up, let's go back to him. I know what you're talking about. And I pick, let's go in the gallery. And so here's an obit. Here's my grandfather's obituary from newspapers.com. Oops. Okay, that's not, whatever. Now over here, link to and add. So if I click on add, I can find the person I want to add it to and just keep adding them, and then it will show up in their profile. Okay. So if you've got something in the gallery, like you brought in an obituary, but you want that obituary to show up in somebody else's profile also, then you just bring it up, and then over there it says link to Walter Blevins, then you can just add, and then you can add whoever else you want to. No matter what the document is, you can add it to it. Okay. Does that answer? Is that sort of?
Yeah, it might also be something like that. Sometimes some of this looks slightly different.
Okay. And so speaking of the gallery, let me just go back to the gallery here. The gallery is where you store all your documents, and this is where you want PDF files and not Word docs and stuff, because Word docs have to be downloaded and then opened in Word or something like that. We never finished up volume on tags. I also create custom tags. Okay. And for example, I have a custom tag called adopted, which I created because that person's adopted. Or Hardy and Hardy. There's a 1,300 page book on the Hardy history, right? And if I used information, I created a custom tag called Hardy and Hardy that I got it out of that book, and then I put a green tag up there. I also have one, if I've got ancestors who are supposedly Indian. I've always been told I had Indian, never found it in anybody's DNA. So,
Mine neither.
yeah.
That's why I did it the first time.
I know. I always told, oh, good, you're part Comanche, and none of my DNA shows part Comanche anywhere. So that's a fallacy. And then I have one called Long Hunter, okay? LH, this LH tag, okay? And now the reason I have that tag is this book is my 5th great grandfather, okay? And it's a genealogy of the Blevins family, which is my mother, Blevins, goes back to about 400 AD, okay? So if I use stuff out of here, I tag it. Let me just actually go back to the tree. Tree search. Let me go to William Blevins. Okay, so here's William Blevins, the 2, and a lot of William Blevins, okay, but I'm looking for the one. This one right here, that got a double asterisk. What does that mean? It's my a direct grandfather or ancestor, direct, and he was the second. So if I bring up his profile, come on up. Okay, and you notice up here I put Long Hunter in the surname column also, and I also put a LH tag, which means that information came out of this book. So I'm flagging stuff that came out of this book. Oops, I did say it's a new member. Okay, and I also will create a special tag down here. This is a custom tag, and that's when you add it from here. You add a custom fact, okay, and and then this one's a custom event. You guys use events much? Okay, so I created a custom event, and I called it the Long Hunter references, okay, and I put the date in here. I put 1691, which was about his birth year, because I want these records to show up near the top. So I put his birth year as the date for the custom record. And so I say Long Hunter reference, he's in page 16, 18, 25, 26, 29, 44. I put what pages I took information out of this book in, okay? And so I use a custom tag or custom fact for that. I also use a DNA marker tag under him. You know, if you go to here, there are tags called DNA markers, all right? So if I come down here, lo and behold, there's DNA markers right there under the facts, all right? And I put in there, and I also use the birth year for that tag because I want it to show up at the top, right? And I say, okay, there are 49 DNA matches. And I've kind of changed this since then. I'll put 49 DNA matches, parentheses, Velma, because maybe I got the data from Velma. Or I'll put a second line that says 23 DNA matches, Tom, and then I'll put the date that I verified it, okay? And that's just information for me. That's when I look at his record and say, oh, at that time, I had 49 DNA matches back to him. That was from me, or it could have been my mother. I may have used my mother's DNA because remember, she has 50% more Blevins than I do, okay? And then I may put another one with a story here, okay? Now, so this guy came over in like 1691, and one of the interesting things I found is that most of my ancestors have been here since before the Revolution. Only Krauser came over in 1883. Most of the rest of them were here a long time before that. And I'm kind of coming up on 8 o'clock, and there's a lot of things I still wanted to cover, but so let me just minimize this. Oh, no. Okay. Assumed dates and names. You find a lot of records that say he was married to Mary, but there's no date or no name for Mary, right? So what I always do, and let me see if I can find one of these. Probably can't find one, but I will say Mary for his spouse, and then I'll put question mark dash Krauser, right? Now the question mark means I don't know her maiden name, dash Krauser, but that's her married name. And then when I find her maiden name, then I'll replace that with her maiden name, right? Because you don't want all these records called Mary that's showing up when you do a search, and there are 15,000 Marys, and also there are no dates. What century are they from? You don't know. So I use, when I put Mary in as his spouse, if I know his date about, then I'll put that same birth date in for the spouse, right? So if he was about 1691, and I didn't know when Agnes was born, I'll put about 1691. And then in the place field, I would have put assumed based on spouse's birth date, right? because you don't want a bunch of Mary records showing up with no date in them, because then you have no clue what century they were even from. So I assume dates. Same for children. Suppose I have a bunch of children and I got a child here with no birth date. Then I will kind of look at it and say, okay, probably somewhere between these two children here, I'm going to put about 1625, and then I'm going to say assumed, either based on the parents' birth date or other siblings. Does that make sense? So if you put a fake date in there, but you say it's assumed based on either a sibling's birth date or I'll add like 20 years to the parent's birth date. So if the parent was born in 1691, I'll say the child was probably born in 1710, 1711, because that's about childbearing age for the parent. And at least I have a date in there, but I say assume based on parent's birth date or father's birth date. And then you don't have all these records that show up with no dates in them when you do a search, right? So I use assumed dates all the time, but I say they're assumed because I don't know. I only assumed based on childbearing age of the mother, or other siblings were born about that time. I'll use assumed based on other siblings. Okay. The census data, I find that the census data, let's say you go to an 1850 census and you see that Joe was 1 year old when the census was taken in 1850. So you're pretty sure he was probably born about 1849, right? If he was 1 year old when the 1850 census was done, he was probably born about 1849. But now you go to the gravestone and you look at the gravestone and it says he was born in 1845 on the grave marker, right? Now, why do you think that is?
Transcribed wrong.
No. Okay. How did the dates get on the grave markers? Somebody told them. Yep. It was on the death certificate. Whoever filled out the death certificate. Well, how old was Joe? Oh, he was about 70. And so they go back and he was born in 1845, whatever, right? And that's what gets put on the grave marker. But you go back to the census for 1850, he said he was only a year old in 1850. So when was he born? 1849, right? Probably. More likely than 1845. I've had to go and correct, people who are the custodian of the grave marker. I've had to say, look at the 1850 census. It says the death certificate may have said 1845, but he was probably more likely born in 1849. And the census was taken in Tennessee, in this town. So that was probably his birthplace also, right? So if you go to the 1850 census and the person is 1 year old, more than likely they were born where that census was taken. So that gives you the birthplace to put in and the age. So even if the grave marker said 1845, I may go up here and make a note under birth that says 1 year old on the 1850 census, 1849. And I may use 1849 instead of what the grave marker says. Right? So.
Don't you think that's more for the older, the 1800s? That's the 1900s.
They whatever you told the coroner, I've got some more recent records. Whoever reported the death to the coroner gave a birth year and a birthplace if they knew it. And that got passed on to the funeral home, and unless that got corrected, that's what wound up on the gravestone. Okay? And I found, discrepancies of several years and more. And as you go up in census, as you go from the 1850 to the 1860 to the 1870 census, you find bigger discrepancies reported by the same people during the census, right? You'll find, he was 1 year old on the 1840 census, and then he should be 11 or 12 on the 1860. Well, he was 15, you know. Again, and you'll find that a whole lot if you're looking at censuses. So the earliest census you can find is probably closer to the true age of the person, right? So if you go back to, if the person was born between 1850, 1860, if you can get an 1860 census that says he was 7 years old, then he was probably born about 1853, right? No matter what the grave marker or the death certificate says. And I've had to correct a bunch of those, okay? So census data I find very helpful. And so and one of the things whoops, this is not a person that would have a census anyway. But anyway, let me get back. Where's my cursor? There we go. All right, so if I go to view and tree, I'm trying to think of a person that I have an example for that, and I am out of time. I don't know. Seth? Is it all right if I keep going or not? Okay, well, I know you're working late, so. All right, but I'm trying to think of an example of a person who would have a census record. But what I would tend to do with the census records, I will create there we go. No, go back to facts. Notice what I do here. I put his birth, 1860 census list him as 2 years old, owner about 1858. On the 1900 census, he lists him 1857 as his birth, and most census show about 1858. Death certificate given by Jim Blevins' son, and grave marker shows 1856. If 1860, he was 2 years old, he should have been 1858, right? Okay. But Jim, his son, said 1856 when he reported his death. Okay. So obviously, I would trust the fact that he was 2 in 1860 versus not 4. I would think the parents can tell the difference between a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, right? And so Jim Blevins reported him as 1856 on his death certificate, and that's what his grave marker said. So I sent a message to the custodian of that grave marker saying, check the 1860 census, and they corrected the death and put a note in the find a grave, right? Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can use the census for that kind of data. And you would also say, now also under this record right here, I created another called a census record, and I put the birth date 1857, so it shows up near the top, right? Because I want these records to be near the top of the profile. And then each census that I find, I put the information that was in that census. Okay, so in 1860 he was 2, in 1870 he was 13, in 1880 he was 22. Those all kind of make sense, right? So obviously he was born about 1848, not 1856, right? And I do that underneath the person, as you can see. I create a census record, 1857, same as his birth year, all right? And not what was reported 1856 on his grave marker, all right? Okay, and I also, again, have the DNA marker. And here's where I said 22 DNA matches as of 4/4/22. Barbara's my mother. So I used her DNA to do, and I used 1857 to make it stay up near the top of the record. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. Again, all this stuff is on the website in case we don't get to cover some of it. Okay, we talked about tree tags and using custom tags if you want to create a special tag to put up at the top, those green fields at the top. So you can add, so if I look at this person here, they're a common DNA ancestor, they're a direct ancestor, and I verified them on the census. So I created a verified census tag, okay? Okay, we talked about DNA data quite a bit. I went through 3 trees. Let me see. Okay, and I showed you how to use the DNA master. Okay, this is how many centigrams do you share with your relatives? Okay, so this is in that handout also talks about if this is you and you go up and down your tree and across, how many DNA CMs are typical for that level? Well, you have to remember, okay, another interesting thing is looking at cousins. You always say, what's a second cousin? So if you look at a second cousin, that means that you have the same great grandparents. And then so you can look at that chart there. So a third cousin, okay, because here's you right here. So if you go sibling, first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, so you go back up third cousin, they have the same great-great-grandparents as you do. So that's what that means. And that's where you can use DNA matches. I've used I'm trying to find, I have no information on my great-grandfather. I know he came over from Germany in 1883. After that, I don't know. But I have found DNA matches who may be third or fourth cousins, right? And they're Krausers. So that means if they're third or fourth cousins, and I take their tree back up, at some point, they have the same great-grandparent that I do, even though I don't know who that is. And so I've traced them, other cousins up, and found they all come from a certain region of Germany. And one of those is my great-grandparents. Now I can take those DNA matches, go up their tree, and if they're a second cousin, like we should have the same third great-grandparent, right? And therefore, if that's my great-grandparent, their third great-grandparent, they should match, even though I was stopped down here with my research. But I've taken DNA matches and then tried to find common ancestors up higher than that, and then try to come back down the tree to match up to my unknown ancestor after my great-grandfather, okay? So that's where DNA matches can help you do that too. So, and let's see. Oops, I'm gonna get on the right screen. So that's called and I also use a test tree. I use test trees to do that. So I create a fake tree called, Krauser ancestors. And I start with a DNA match and start going up their tree, trying to look where I can connect it to my tree. But I don't want to do it in my tree, so I create a fake or test tree to do that with. Okay, and it's talked about here in this too. You've all shared out your trees and stuff to other people, and so you know how to do that and stuff, right? Okay. I'm probably not going to have a whole lot. It's in the paper here on doing it. If you go on to the senior website and download this, you can see that. Oh, you also can, you know how to merge duplicate records and stuff when you find duplicate records, how to merge them and stuff. Okay, that's described in here for you. I've used Messenger to contact DNA matches to talk to them, and I've also been contacted by other people with the Messenger. Okay. It talks about adding sources and web links. If you find an interesting website about your ancestor, you can copy the web link and then add it into your tree. Let's see. So, down here, this probably wouldn't have any, but there add web links. So you copy the web link on the internet and then you paste it. I'm not going to do it here, but you paste the web address here and then you describe it, what it's for. So, okay. And you can also add sources and stuff here. So I'm just trying to go through some of the tips that I may have. Ethnicity we talked about. And let's see, bring my paper back up here. Okay. I wrote this 19-page paper, so this is up on the website for you, and it goes through everything I either have covered or wanted to cover in here. There's a couple things in here I want to show you. That's we talked about the through lines and using the dual screens to do that. And then using DNA through lines. Okay. Whoops. I wish I could see more of this. Okay. I compared, let me close this over here, get more screen. Okay. I took all of my daughter, my son, myself, my mother, my father, Marie, my wife, self, brother, mother, and dad. Okay. And I compared our ethnicity. Okay. And that's in that paper there. Okay. And there was something I was trying to get up here. Okay. So here it talks about my mother and I have 50% shared DNA, but that's expected, right? My wife and her mother have 50%. My son and I have 50%. My wife and son have 50%, because remember, they only get half, right? And my mother and my daughter, and we have 27. That gets down to the 25, right? So, so that's in there also. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm blasting through this. Okay, so this is the different cousin levels and what you share, right? That's talked about in there in that paper. Okay, DNA data, trees to mark, two tags to mark records. This talks about the census and the census masters. And my email address is right here, tomseniorcomputerguy@gmail.com. If you want a copy of the actual Word files, send me an email and I'll send you a zip file with the actual Word files you can use. Okay. Census data. I'm just trying to make sure nothing that I haven't really, you've used hints before. And to be very careful with hints, because you look at a hint and there's 10,000 Joe Smiths, and which one is your Joe Smith? Gallery, we talked about facts, ancestry page layout. Okay. Dual screens. I think I covered most of the topics. I do have one more hint I want to give you. I talk about at the very end here. Census data, do not use the census masters. Tree tags we talked about. DNA data we've spent a lot of time on. Being a DNA manager we talked about. DNA loss each generation. Okay. Ethnicity. Okay, that's where I talked about. See, my ancestors were probably right in this region here, where they could have been German or Eastern Europe. And that's why I'm only 13% rather than 2. I'm only 2% this one and 11% here. So my ancestors are probably right in here somewhere. And this talks about DNA through lines we talked about. It's a lot of material to try to cover in 2 hours. Relationships, sharing your tree. This tells you how to share your tree if you need to know how to share it. Okay. using test tree to find missing links, which is trying to connect to past my great grandfather. I'm actually writing a whole nother paper on that. Exporting your file if you want to send it out to somebody else. Like when Velma decides she wants to do a tree, I will create a GED file and then let her daughter import it into her tree, give her a start, right? So she doesn't have to retype everything. They can just import my tree and then delete what they don't want in it. Keeping track of interesting ancestors. How many of you have come across an interesting ancestor? You didn't write it down. You kind of remember what it was, and then you kind of forget who it is, okay? And you kind of remember what they did that was famous, but then you can't remember who they were. What I suggest is you create a Word file, and you call it Interesting Ancestors, okay? And so, and in that Word file, you create a father, the Blevins side and the Krauser side. And then you put the interesting ancestors and you type out something about them. So right here, this is an example of my Word file. So interesting ancestors of the Krauser line. Bollinger, George Frederick, took a large group of settlers to Missouri with the promise of land grants from the Spanish, who ruled Missouri then, right? And he said, if you go back and bring us a lot of people, we'll all give them all land, but they have to swear they're Catholic, because the Spanish were all Catholic. If you sign a paper that says you're Catholic, we'll give you so many acres of land. So he went back to Virginia and brought back a couple of hundred people, and the Spanish gave them all land. And he was settled in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Bollinger County. Missouri is named in his honor. He opened a sawmill and grist, which is a historic monument in the state park. So that's an interesting fact. Now, if I put this in a Word file, now I can share this Word file with my family, and I don't have to remember George Bollinger. When was, and also this link, if I click on this link, takes me right to his record in my tree. Okay, so, and then Hadley Simpson here came from Ireland as part of the Irish Quakers, immigrated here because of religious persecution. He bought 1,000 acres of land from William Penn. Interesting fact. You know who William Penn is. Okay. In Newmarket, Delaware, when the state lines were drawn, his house was in Delaware and his land was in Pennsylvania. The state line was right through his property. Okay. And his house is still there, but it's a private house and it's up a long driveway. You can't drive up the driveway and see the house, but it's still there. Okay, Samuel Hardy, member of the Continental Congress, 1785, Congress of New York City, died in New York City when Congress was in session, nominated Thomas Jefferson to go to France to replace Benjamin Franklin. His funeral was in most of the papers at that time. See the gallery, and I actually have a copy from newspapers.com of his funeral, and all of Congress attended his funeral, and all the delegates and all that. He was buried in Trinity, or St. Paul's Church, which is part of Trinity. Although the history books say he was buried in Philadelphia next to Ben Franklin, which is a lie. And I've actually researched this. Okay. Now, and again, he was a third cousin, 6 times removed, distant, but he was still a member of Continental Congress. And after his death, Hardy County, Virginia was named after him, but became part of West Virginia when it became a state. And if I click on the link, it takes me right to his record, and I can go into the gallery and see all this. So if you write all this stuff down, you don't have to kind of go back and, who was that, when, where, and then if your children or whatever want to know who the interesting people are, you just send them the paper, right? And again, Jones, James Well, first cousin, 6 time removed. He was one of the 300 settlers who came to Texas with Stephen Austin. When Stephen F. Austin settled Texas, James named his son Stephen Austin Jones. So you know who Stephen Austin is, right? Settled Texas and one of the first lieutenant governors of Texas. So an interesting fact, an ancestor. And on the Blevins side, supposedly, according to this, my Blevins side goes back, and they were the rulers of Wales, and back to like 400 AD until the English defeated them, and then they were no longer the rulers of Wales. Okay. Now, I didn't show that up here, but that's an interesting fact, you know. So, so I recommend that you start a Word file and then start putting this sort of stuff like this. And again, it's in the paper here for you to use as a template. Okay. And there's also a copy of it, you know, that you can look at. And that way, when your kids and stuff ask you, well, gee, who's interesting, you have all these people that as you find them, you can put in there, and you can jump right to their, you know, right to their profile and look at them. Okay. Let's see. I think it's kind of the shotgun approach, but you know, I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to cover. I hopefully you got some tips out of there that would be useful to you. You know, and like I said, my email address is here, or one of them. It's the one I use for Tom, the senior computer guy, because I'm the, you know, work at the senior center as a volunteer over there. Okay, and so you could always ask me, you know, email and ask me questions you want, or if you want a copy of the DNA Masters original documents. How many of you have Word on your computer? How many of you don't have a word processor?
I use my iPad now.
Oh, you use your iPad? Okay. All right. LibreOffice is free. If you know about LibreOffice at all. It's a look up LibreOffice. Talk about it in here. It's a free program that has Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access, and it's totally free. You don't have to buy it. Okay. It's not Microsoft. It's LibreOffice. Okay, but it's free. Okay, and that's in here. All right, I don't want to keep you guys up too late, but are there any questions?
Do you have any tips on sources for name changes from the old country to the new country? If you know that a name has probably been changed.
Yes, I don't really. What I find is like when I go back to German records and stuff. My name was originally Krau and then some funny symbol.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
what made me think of it, because I think
Right.
Gray was a Grice,
But-
I'm not sure.
Right, but yeah, like if I look at my third grade, keep losing my cursor here.
I wasn't sure if you had any like. source.
No, I don't really have a source for that. No, but
Take your word for it. It's like, you're doing it wrong, but that's probably how that was put there.
Yeah, yeah.
right, but like a lot of my
For short names, and there seems to be.
right. So as you go down here, you'll find that KRAU and then that's funny beta looking symbol or something. Is that what you're talking about? I know what you're talking about. And no, I don't, because I found that like my great grandfather's was Charles Fritz Krauser. But in German, that's Karl Friedrich.
Right, right.
Okay. You know,
Yeah,
but he went by
William
Charles
Shakespeare,
Fritz,
Wilhelm.
but Charles is Karl, Karl, and Fritz is Frederick.
Right.
And then Krauser is Krau, and then this funny symbol. And I put both of them in there when I look at that record and stuff, okay? But I don't really know a source that, you know, I just, you know, what's the German? Yeah, you can say, what is the German equivalent? You can Google what's
Right,
the,
okay, that's true, yeah.
you can Google what is the German equivalent of Charles Frederick, and it came up Charles Fritz, and it came up Karl Frederick. You know, so you could Google it and try that.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Hopefully you got something out of it. All right. And you can, like I say, this paper I'm looking at here is online on the Senior Center website. So you can take it and download it and stuff. And if you want the masters, email me and I'll send you a copy of the masters and how you're supposed to use them. Okay? All right. Hope I didn't keep you up too late.
Oh, that was good.
Thank you.
Okay.